If you are interested in getting better at photography and street photography more specifically, then this is the video for you. We are going to be covering 7 tips that can help you get better at street photography and stick with the craft for a long period of time, because I feel like we think getting better at street photography will happen over a few months, but in my experience, it actually takes a good few years to actually get better at. So I'm excited for this one. All right, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Brock Wonder. I am a content marketer, content creator, and of course a street photographer based in Toronto. And on this channel, we talk about everything from content marketing and brand strategy to learning how to create good content both for yourself and your business for social media. So the big thing that I love to get across is that my biggest focus in my own personal life is to have something in my life that can help me with my health, my wealth, and my creativity. And street photography is my way to basically get creative and feed that sort of need to live a good life. I absolutely love street photography. It's how I got started in my creative career, by basically just walking around the local city that I was living in the Netherlands during my graduate degree, and basically growing a following from there. And as a result of doing street photography, I was able to meet really great people, figure out that it doesn't take much to be able to practice your creativity, get a new hobby out of it. That helped me learn social media and be able to basically launch my career. So there are a lot of benefits to doing street photography, and my hope is that you can see the benefits of literally picking up a camera, walking around for an hour, and seeing what you can make. So if you love photography and you love street photography, then keep on watching, because we are going to start with tip number 1. The first tip I have for street photography is to use what's called the fishing technique. Overall, the fishing technique is when you set up a scene in front of you. So maybe you have a shot of leading lines, or you see light in an interesting way coming off of a building, and you basically wait for a subject to walk into your frame at the perfect spot that you know is going to make for a really interesting street photo. Why this tip is number 1 is because using the fishing technique is going to help you develop more patience and more anticipation for the movement happening around you. Because I think when we first start off as street photographers, we're just moving from one location to the next, thinking that more interesting photos are going to come down the road the more we move, without really realizing that the best thing we can do is stop in one spot for a long period of time and wait for an interesting subject to fill the frame of wherever it is that we're at. The more patient you are, the better your photos are going to be. And of course, if you can then start anticipating people's movements, that's when the photos are really going to start to come. So that leads me to tip 2, which is understand what you're trying to capture ahead of time. Anticipation is so huge in street photography, and that is because you need to go in with some sort of story or idea before you actually shoot your street photos. In my last video on the Toronto series, I talked about that a little bit, that if I'm going to take some street photos at 5 p.m., I know it's the end of the day and it's the commute home. That's the storyline that I need to have in my head. And so I'm anticipating events that relate to the commute home for what photos I'm going to take. Tip number 3 then is to set boundaries for yourself. A big thing that I want to get across on this channel is how diverse cities can actually be. And when you go from one district to the next, your photos can change dramatically. And this is because the culture of where you're taking your photos actually changes with the district. So if I'm shooting in the financial district, like you see me do all the time, versus I'm going to shoot on the beaches in the West End, which is a more chill area, I can head on down to the beach for some photos. The street photography is going to be dramatically different in both. And what can often happen is that we wander. We go from the financial district into Chinatown, let's say, and all of a sudden, the ideas aren't coming as easily. Maybe we're struggling to find compositions. And what I like to do is actually map out a route ahead of time so that I know where I'm gonna go and I know what to expect from what photos are actually possible. So that if I'm in the financial district, the suits stay where the suits are. And if I go to Chinatown, I know what kind of cultural impact I want my photos to have. Tip 4 is to not be afraid to raise your ISO. So now that we are practicing our patience, we have more anticipation, we know what area we're actually going to shoot in. Now it's time to make sure that our photos come out sharp and crisp. The best And also the worst part about street photography is that it's not that technical. You don't need a crazy camera to actually shoot it, and you can basically just head out and do whatever you want. And if it looks good, it looks good. It's inevitably up to you as the photographer. And so my advice to raise your ISO is because if you are not getting sharp subjects or your photos aren't sharp, your shutter speed's probably not high enough. And so that's the number one thing. If your shutter is 1/200 plus, your photos are gonna be sharp pretty much majority of the time. Obviously, you probably wanna keep your ISO below 10,000, depending on what camera you're using, but don't be afraid to bump it up in the hopes of actually getting a sharp photo as a result or whatever you're trying to capture. Tip 5 is pick a color palette. Now, I know everybody says, you know, find your style, shoot street photography, and you'll find your cohesive feed look. And yes, it comes over time. But what I can say is that if you do your street sessions in intervals, so let's say you go out twice a week, on that week, say, I want to edit my photos to look blue, or I want to edit my photos to look orange. And picking a color palette really helps you in establishing mood and the creativity of your photos before you actually head out there. And again, in the back of your mind, helps frame up what you want your photos to look like. Blue are colder, more moodier images. Maybe that means then you're gonna end up shooting in the rain. And if you went on a sunset night, your photos that are blue are gonna be a lot tougher to find for you. So really picking that color palette helps you already set yourself on what's possible and what you wanna have happen. I've always found that my outcome is better because I have gotten into a flow of having specific looks that I like in my photography. And so I start seeing photos preemptively that match the look that I know I'm gonna edit the photo in afterwards. So really thinking ahead in that way is only gonna help. Tip 6 is to be respectful. I see a lot of judgment online about taking photos of people. And what I can say to you is I think I've only ever gotten stopped once for taking a photo of somebody and they asked me to delete the photo and I deleted the photo. When you are taking photos of people, make sure that you do so in a way that's either nonchalant or extremely overt, where they know you are taking their photo. Maybe you asked ahead of the time, or you at least shoot them a smile when the photo is over. It can strike up a conversation, and I'll be honest with you, 95% of the time, people are pretty okay with you taking their photos. I've even struck up conversations where I send them their photos afterwards. But if you do it in a disrespectful way, you know, running up to somebody, taking the photo at close length, 24 millimeters, that's only gonna cause you problem, and your street photography is not gonna be top notch as a result. So really being respectful as a street photographer is huge. My final tip is to pick what inspires you. So really go out, find 3 creators on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or whatever with a style that you mesh with, and figure out what it is about those 3 that you like most. Pick the elements and then say, cool, I wanna make something that has a lot of architecture, a lot of mood, maybe it's colors in their highlights that you like, something along those lines. Once you drill down what inspires you, you'll know what you need to create afterwards. And so it really helps create the idea of what we want our photos to talk about beforehand, because when we know what we like, we can then just make what we like instead of just going out with no plan. So my biggest advice then really is to plan ahead of time and learn what it is you want to capture. If I were to sum up these 7 tips, that's really what it comes down to, thinking ahead about what it is we want our photography to communicate. And these 7 tips are a way to do just that. So with that, I'm gonna end the video off here. I hope you found it useful. And if you're looking for some BTS on how I capture my street photos, I've recently put out the Toronto series, so be sure to check that one out. And with that, I hope to see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.